Today's episode with Jackson Laundry is brought to you by the OMNi-BiOTiC Klartext Triathlon 2024. Are you ready for the ultimate triathlon experience in the stunning city of Graz, Austria? Save the date for the OMNi-BiOTiC Klartext Triathlon on the 25th of August 2024, an event for professionals and passionate age group athletes. Picture this, a thrilling swim down the Mur River right in the heart of the city, a 90-kilometer bike ride through picturesque vineyards in the Graz region with a fully closed route for your safety, and a city center half marathon. But that's not all. There is even a professional race classified as a PTO silver event with a 20-meter drafting rule on the bike. You will be racing alongside the pros, feeling the excitement up close. Our motto is simple yet powerful. From athletes for athletes. We understand your needs and prioritize your experience. Here is what you can look forward to. Fair registration fees, an exceptional event venue, special goodies for all participants, and unforgettable after-race party. And for our podcast listeners, a fantastic opportunity awaits. Get a 20% discount on OMNi-BiOTiC race nutrition by using the code Klartext20. It's the perfect way to fuel up for the race of a lifetime. Don't let this opportunity pass you by. Join the OMNi-BiOTiC Klartext Triathlon 2024 and make unforgettable memories. Register today and be a part of something extraordinary. We'll see you at the finish line. You will find all the information and the links in our show notes. And now, enjoy listening to the episode with Jackson Laundry. Hello, welcome to another episode of Klartext Triathlon. I am Alexander, and today we have a very special guest, a Canadian pro triathlete, the winner of the Ironman 70.3 in Michigan. Please welcome Jackson Laundry.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me, and looking forward to chatting with you and maybe reaching a bit of a different audience than people who might have heard of me before. So that's always exciting too.
For me, it's always exciting to talk to international athletes, and it's a quite new format. I already talked to Tamra Jewett, and I really liked her. So I'm very tensed about our conversation today. And my first question is always, how are you? How was your day till now?
Good, thanks. Yeah, it's about noon here. So it's a recovery day for me. So I just kind of slept in, got some breakfast, did a little easy swim, and now I'm just going to chat with you for a while and then a little easy bike later. So I like to take my recovery days really relaxed, and I don't really consider any of the activity I do to be training. I consider it to be active rest. So I'm really have a very low heart rate, like under 100 beats per minute always, probably. I don't really record it, but it's almost just like the same effort as if I was going for a walk or something, just to kind of move my body a little bit and focus on, rest. And then tomorrow back at it hard again.
I understand. And I say recovery days are there for doing podcasts. So it's the perfect day for both of us. And in Canada, I think a lot of people know you, but in Germany, the situation is different. So let's make sure that our audience gets to know you a little bit better, Jackson. Could you please introduce yourself briefly?
My name's Jackson Laundry. I'm 30 years old. I've been doing triathlon for quite a while. I did my very first race back in 2004 before I turned 11. So quite a long time ago. I always loved sports as a kid. I couldn't get enough sports. I would play sports all day if I was allowed, and couldn't sit still in class. And, that's probably the same story for a lot of triathletes, I would imagine. And growing up in Canada, I played hockey. In the summers, I played soccer. I did baseball. Every sport that school would allow, I would play. But I excelled most in track and field, running, long distance running. That's where I kind of seemed to do the best. So once I got into high school, I started realizing that if I wanted to compete at a high level, I should probably find an endurance sport. So I did some running and did reasonably well, but nothing too special. And then I moved to triathlon a little bit more seriously. I started training more and just kind of got better. But I never trained too much at a young age. I didn't really train seriously until I was probably 20 or maybe about 19. And then I started getting more into it and doing well at age group worlds and things like that. But yeah, I didn't really have huge success as a young athlete in triathlon. In high school, running, my best time for like 3,000 meters was 9:24, which is, pretty quick, but there's high school athletes that can go like well under 9 minutes, probably even down around 8:30. So I wasn't really exceptional by any means, but I kind of gradually improved and sort of started seeing my success really increase kind of in my mid 20s. So I guess if there's any message to sort of share from that, it's that people develop at different rates, and you don't have to be a child prodigy to have success, especially in endurance sports.
Yeah, that's interesting. There are different types of athletes. There are, for example, in swimming, the children, and they train so much. They train about 10 times in the water and 6 times of land training. So a lot, but many of them lose their motivation, at about the age of 18, 20. And I think it's better that you do a lot of sports, a lot of different sports, so that you don't lose your motivation when you are 20, 25, 30 years old. So I think your life story in sports is quite good to make a sustainable sporting career.
Yeah, I think so. And it wasn't necessarily chosen that way. That's just the way it worked out for me. But yeah, that's the same message I tell people who have kids who are excited about triathlon. I usually say that's great, and they should train, and especially the swim. It's great to develop, but also don't put too much pressure or take results too seriously. And it's great to do other sports, all year round. You don't have to be totally focused on triathlon. I never trained for triathlon through the winter until I was second year university was the first time I did that. So I would have been 19. That was the first year I actually trained in the winter more than just doing like one run a week or something. So yeah, you can definitely start late, especially with endurance sports, and it's never too late to start either. We see people into their, middle age and even older who just start with triathlon because it's fun, and you can keep doing it for a lot of years.
That's true. I completely agree. But now you are a pro athlete that want to become a world-class athlete. And so triathlon is more than just a hobby. You have to make your living by being a pro triathlete. But it's very interesting for me what triathlon means to you personally beyond just sports.
Yeah, it's for me, it's my real goal with being a pro athlete is to just see what I can actually accomplish. And it doesn't necessarily matter if that's first place at world championships or, I've been fifth. I have been fifth at world championships. And if that's the best I ever achieved, then that's also fine. I just I need to do all the things I can do to be the best I can be. And just know that I put my best effort in. And sometimes a lot of the time that means training or my preparations, like just, it's not necessarily always fun, but you put the work in so that later, you can look back and say, okay, I did the best I could. So for me, it's more of a journey of sort of exploring what can I accomplish. And the other thing that I think is good about that is that later in life, you can kind of apply that to anything. So when I'm done with triathlon, whenever that might be, done with triathlon professionally, that is, I can put that into any other career I decide. And that same sort of mindset and that same kind of drive. So for me, that's what it is. And obviously I do enjoy training, and it's a healthy lifestyle. But yeah, I just want to see what can I do? How good can I get? And I do think I still am and can keep getting better. But I always had, like, as a kid, I always sort of dreamed of like high performance in whatever it was. Like every sport I did, I thought, I would look at like the pro athletes and think like, wow, it's amazing what they're doing. So now I think I found the sport that, like, the best sport for me. If if I tried every sport in the world, I still think probably triathlon would be my best. And I found that sport, and now I want to see how good I can get in that sport. And yeah, that's my real goal. I'm not like a lot of people kind of do it because they just absolutely love training and like they enjoy it a lot. And I do enjoy training, but that's not why I'm doing this. I just want to see what I can accomplish.
I get what you mean. You want to become the best version of yourself. And so, why do you do pro triathlon?
Instead of another sport, you mean?
Yes, but also, why do you do sports as a professional?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, for me, part of it is when I finished university, I there wasn't really a lot of job opportunities with what I had as a degree. I took human kinetics, which is like kinesiology, the study of movement, study of the human body, and that was great. And I loved the stuff I learned, and it's applicable to what I do now. But the opportunities just aren't there unless you go to school more and you go to take nursing or you take another degree. And I knew I didn't want to do that. I was really starting to enjoy triathlon and see more success. And I thought, this is my opportunity to really go for it. So part of it was circumstance. Like it just made the most sense at the time. And I kind of fell into it. And then I just really enjoyed racing, especially. Like I love getting out on the race course. That's why I race so much. Some people, I probably race 10 times a year most of the time. And that's really a lot. And that's more than you'll see from, the absolute world's best, sort of like Jan Frodeno's and what have you. Although some of them are racing a lot too. But I love to race and like push myself. And I think being a pro athlete is really the only way to actually test yourself, because I quickly got fast enough that on the age group level, there just wasn't much challenge there anymore, at least locally. So I thought, okay, I got to keep going pro and just pushing myself and seeing what I can do.
I get your point, and now you are a pro athlete since 10 years, I would say. And now, would you say that it was the right decision to fully focus on triathlon?
Yeah, I definitely think it was the right choice for me. It was a bit of a risk because in the first few years you don't make much money, and you go into a little bit of debt, and you kind of think, okay, how long is this going to be sustainable? But I just believe that I could keep improving and get to a high enough level that I'm making a career out of it, which I probably started having, a decent living out of triathlon in about 2018. So it took about 4 years for me to get there. And then, yeah, now I'm like really happy with the choice I made to focus on triathlon full time. And yeah, I mean, it's not like I'm making a huge amount of money or anything, but I definitely have a sustainable career at this point, and I'm still kind of growing my career each year. So excited to keep pushing that and see where that goes. But yeah, I'm also pretty lucky because when I was sort of starting in triathlon, like the cost of living were a lot lower. So you could rent a room, and like I was renting a room in a place for like $500 a month or something, and now you just can't do that. So it's harder for new pros coming up to find a sustainable sort of low cost options to keep trying with triathlon. Like it's just more expensive to live, especially here in North America. The cost of living are really, really high now. So if I was starting now, it would be a big challenge because I'd be going into a lot more debt, which is hard. So I definitely appreciate that the timing I had was pretty fortunate. And yeah, the level of performance is now really, really high. So it's just really hard to get into the point where you're getting on podiums and getting sponsors and things like that. So I definitely think that I was pretty lucky as well.
That's true. And especially in Germany, there are a lot of pro athletes that cannot really focus on pro triathlon. They have the pro license, but they have to work because otherwise they wouldn't be able to make their living. And it's very stressful and there is no real financial support. So I would say you are in a lucky situation that you can make your living by being a pro triathlete.
Yeah, for sure. It's very competitive in Germany. There's a lot more pro athletes. The average level is a lot higher. In Canada, really you're competing with the Americans as well. So that's probably the main competition because there just aren't very many pro races in Canada. But USA's right there. That's where I do all my racing. And there's lots of great American athletes, but even still, I think the depth of competition is just not quite as much as what you see in Europe. And not only that, but Ironman is an American company, and they really push, as you guys know, there's more races in America than any other country. So we're pretty fortunate for those opportunities as well. But on the other side of it, if you're European, you have huge levels of competition to really show you what the level is and they can push you to improve. It's not that hard to find good athletes. Like when I was kind of starting out and coming up in the sport, there weren't a lot of athletes locally racing that I could test myself against. We had Lionel Sanders and Cody Beals, but they kind of already moved on to the bigger races. And I was sort of stuck in a spot where I had to decide, do I spend a lot of money to travel and race, or do I race locally and save more money and sort of take the more conservative approach? So there's always positives and negatives to every situation, but yeah, it's definitely hard to make prize money when you're German, because there's a lot of good German athletes, that's for sure.
That's true. And when you do the majority of your races in America, for example, it's absolutely right. It's easier to qualify for Hawaii, for example, but I saw an image a few days ago on Instagram, and it was said 11 of 12 athletes were Europeans. It was about the Ironman 70.3 World Championships and the Ironman World Championships in Nice and Hawaii. So that was very interesting, but that shows how competitive the European athletes are.
Yeah, we see it all the time. Europeans come over sometimes, obviously, to race in North America, and they usually do very well. So Americans going over to Europe sometimes do well, but more often than not, the Europeans get the better of us. I think part of that is also the time change. It's really hard to go east and race unless you go very early. So I've kind of learned that lesson a few times. If you go, even for me, it takes probably more than a week to adjust. And that can be tough when you don't necessarily want to go 2 weeks before a race. So I think that's something that I still have to kind of perfect, because a lot of these World Championships and things like that are going to be Europe, or next year it's all the way in New Zealand. So obviously I don't want to be going 2 days before that one. But yeah, Europeans come over to North America and do really well. And then, yeah, Kona, they're usually dominating the race. So if there was a competition of Europe versus North America, I think Europe would definitely have probably two teams. When we see that in the Collins Cup, Europe could probably field two teams and still win, but probably be first and second place.
But that has changed. 30 years ago, the American athletes were great, especially Mark Allen. But now I think the Europeans are better, but perhaps in a few years that will change again. And you're absolutely right. The time shift plays an important role. It has an impact on your performance, and it's always important to adapt to the conditions of the race, especially when you think about Hawaii. It's always good to be 3 or 4 weeks to be there before the race, so that you can do all the heat adaptation and get used to the time shift and so on.
Yeah, for sure. We see people going to Hawaii really early, or at least somewhere with a similar climate. I don't know about Hawaii myself. I've only done one full, so we'll see if I decide to go there. But with the way the PTO and Ironman are coming up with their different series and things like that, it's hard to plan. It's hard to plan any more than a few months in advance now, because things are changing really quickly. So I'm just kind of holding off on making any decisions about that. But yeah, Hawaii is definitely a really tough climate. Anyone who goes there and races pretty much comes back and says the same thing. Like, that's such a hot race. It's a totally different thing. So you can't just go there from like a Canadian climate and expect to do well.
Absolutely, you are right. And you already mentioned the competition between the PTO and Ironman. And last week, the world's largest triathlon organizer, Ironman, has announced a new series for professionals for the 2024 season. and athletes now have the opportunity to accumulate points in a maximum of 5 races from a selection of 18 events to participate in the distribution of a total bonus of 1.7 million US dollars at the end of the year. And I think, yeah, it's crazy because 2 months ago, the PTO said we make a new long distance world championship series, and there is a lot of change, like you already said. But now I have the feeling that Ironman is doing a similar thing like the PTO, but a little bit better. That was my impression.
Yeah, I think it's similar. Definitely, there's some differences, and I think the whether it's better or not depends on what athlete you are. Really, like for someone who's ranked in the top probably 15 and focuses more on the 70.3 or shorter, the PTO series is going to be better because they're just going to have more success in those races. The total amount of earnings potential is probably similar, but they're going to pick the PTO series. Whereas with Ironman, there's a couple things that's different. One is that anyone can do the races. As far as I know, they'll likely fill up. So I don't know whether they will choose to let people in based off of their performance or their kind of ranking in a sense, or if it's just going to be first come, first serve. But I expect some of those races to definitely get filled up, but you don't have to be ranked in the top 20 or 30 to do the race. So that's a great opportunity for people who haven't necessarily had amazing results yet to really show that they can compete and to go and get those points. So that's one thing that's better with the Ironman series. It's a series really that's for full distance athletes. If you look at the way the points are, you're not going to be in the top 10 at all if you don't do probably at least 2 full distance, probably 3. So I think it's interesting they did that. And I think they did that so that people would have to choose the Ironman series instead of the PTO, because if you're going to do 3 full distance races, you're not going to be able to do the PTO series, at least not the full series. So they're gonna be taking all those full distance athletes away from the PTO series, which is probably part of what they wanted to do, and I think that was an effective way to do it. So the people who kind of don't really benefit a huge amount from the Ironman series are people like me who race 70.3s, but I'm also not ranked high enough to get into the PTO series necessarily. So I'm one of those people who might end up with a bit of an unfortunate position where neither series really benefits me, but I'll still probably do 5 races and hopefully get in the top 50 in the Ironman series, which would be great. And then, but if I can get into the PTO series, I'll probably do that because I think that's a really good opportunity. And I've definitely been disappointed with how I've performed at pretty much all the PTO races. So I've shown up to those races with good fitness and just not executed a good race. And that's been something that I want to prove that I can do. And I know that I can come top 5 in those races. It just has to come together. So it'll be interesting to see what happens at the end of this year. There's a lot of things that are still undecided. And yeah, we'll see what I end up doing. But it's great to have the Ironman competing with PTO and just bringing more money into the sport. And even if somebody doesn't do either series, it's still going to open up a lot of opportunity in the other races to have success where you're just not going to have the very top level athletes doing those races. And it gives sort of those lower ranked athletes an opportunity to get some podiums and generate some sponsorships and income from the sport.
It's definitely a great decision for pro triathlon. And I think that especially athletes like Sam Long or Joe Skipper could benefit from the Ironman's decision.
Yeah, I think the people who really are going to be excited for the Ironman series are, like Joe Skipper, maybe Patrick Lange, Matt Hansen, those types of athletes who are mostly doing full distance or mostly succeeding in full distance. They're going to love it because they have an opportunity to win $200,000 extra dollars, especially a guy like Joe Skipper, who pretty much only races full distance. I actually am pretty good friends with him. I just did a training camp with him in France a couple months ago. And I've been talking to him a little bit, and he's just so excited for it. Like it basically chooses his race calendar for him. He does those 5 races, and he's really consistent, and he can have 3 or 4 good fulls in a year. So it's perfect for him, and that's kind of the type of person who didn't really get any benefit from the PTO series. So they kind of deserve that opportunity too. So it's really exciting to see how that plays out, and it'll be interesting to see if like Magnus Ditlev and Sam Laidlow, guys like that, if they choose to do the Ironman one or maybe the PTO, or if they try to do both.
Yeah, that will be interesting. I think Joe is a great athlete and one of the most underestimated athletes in the world. And it was a pity that he didn't have a good race in Nice, because before the race, I really thought that might be the race for him, because the bike course was very tough and technical, and he's a very strong athlete on the bike and also on the run. But unfortunately, at the day in Nice, it didn't work out for him. But yeah, next year is another year, and then he will succeed. I'm quite sure.
Yeah, me too. I talked to Joe quite a bit after the race, and it was disappointing. He was in good shape for sure. And I mean, if you want to really look into it, you can watch his YouTube recap. But he had a bad swim, but he was riding well, and he had some kind of mechanical on the bike, unfortunately, which definitely cost him a lot of time. It's always a bit of a sometimes with different types of gearing, and you're putting different race cranks and different things on. Sometimes things just don't quite work right, and unfortunately that happened to him. But yeah, that was a good course for him, and I think he's gonna, the next time that the World Championship is in Nice, if they go back for the men, he'll really be looking for revenge on that course. But he'll do well in Kona too. We've seen him top 5 in Kona, so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But he's going to be racing Ironman Florida, and that race just came out the start list, and there's some really strong athletes on that one. So that'll be kind of the big finale race of the year, I think, in terms of the full distance. We'll see some really top level guys, and I think Joe's going to be very strong in that one.
I hope so. But now back to our Ironman PTO thing. So at the moment, you cannot decide what races you're going to do next year, because you just don't know. And a few weeks ago, I spoke to Tamara Jewett, and for her, it was even before Ironman's decision was announced, it was very, very difficult to plan a personal race calendar due to the many options. And now there are even more options. So a very difficult situation, I would say.
Yeah, I guess it's definitely a good problem to have when you have a lot of good options. So for me, a lot will depend on what the PTO does with their series. If they kind of offer athletes contracts to go and do the races, and if they do that, then obviously I would have to be offered a contract, and I'm kind of on that borderline of where I might get in or might not. So I kind of have to wait and see what happens there. But even if I do get into the PTO series, I'll still be doing some of the Ironman races. We'll see which ones, but I usually always start my season in Oceanside. But I think the PTO's first race is around that same time now, so it would definitely be a bit of a tough choice. So yeah, I'll have to wait and see. Unfortunately, they don't have everything planned yet, but I still have 3 races left this year, so I've got to kind of focus on that too.
Okay, so in your opinion, there will be no real winner of the competition between the PTO and Ironman. Am I right?
Yeah, hopefully they both have good series that are successful. That would be great. The challenge is with PTO, they're still trying to put the races together, and they're not fully organized yet. Like Ironman already has those races in place. They have the broadcasts pretty much figured out. Like they could improve them, but they're there and they're ready. So I'd say Ironman has a bit of an upper hand now, and PTO really has to deliver a good series to kind of stay relevant. And the pressure's on for them, because if they kind of have another year like this year where they don't have a lot of races and it just doesn't come together like they hope, then that's going to be a struggle for them to kind of gain some of the interest of the triathlon fans. So yeah, hopefully PTO steps up, but right now they're really, I think that Ironman's a little bit ahead in terms of what they're able to produce for races for the pros.
I think so too. And sometimes I fear that we will have a division in triathlon like in boxing with multiple simultaneous world championship champions, not championships.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, it kind of already is that way a little bit. The PTO races aren't they're not like a world championship, but the level of competition is, I would say. So we'll see if the PTO can kind of increase their notoriety to where people consider it to be like a world championship if you win that series. So yeah, hopefully it doesn't get to a point where either Ironman or PTO are making a decision that the athletes can only race with them if they do, because either one could do that at any time. But I think they're worried to do that because, especially PTO, if they did that, then people would just pick Ironman because they're going to be around. There's no guarantee the PTO is going to be around for a long time, so everyone's going to want to stay friendly with Ironman no matter what. So yeah, we'll see what happens here. But the PTO's got to pull things together and get their calendar out there and start to really put that work in.
Yeah, that's true. And you are a pro athlete and you participate both in PTO races, but also in Ironman races. Till now, do you have a preference and how do you prioritize between them?
Yeah, it really depends on the race, but so far I've just performed way better every time I do an Ironman race, and I think that's more coincidence than anything. The only PTO race I've done well at was the first Collins Cup. Other than that, I've just had an off day every time. So, but I really like the PTO races the way that, for one thing, it's nice to have the course to yourself. It's nice to have the whole race focused on just the pros. Obviously, with Ironman, I think it's cool that the age groupers race with us as well. But sometimes when there's multiple laps, it can get a little bit congested and that can be a bit tricky. But yeah, I don't know. I can't really pick favorites. They're very different. But in my opinion, like the best type of season is one where you can race both. So hopefully that's kind of the way that things go for me. But yeah, if I had to choose one over the other right now, I'd probably choose Ironman just because I've raced so many 70.3s. I've probably raced close to 50, and they do a good job. They're consistent, and Ironman's always been good to me, and I don't really have any complaints. I know that people can. It's always easy to pick apart somebody for they should invest more in this or that, but they've been around and supporting the pros forever. So I'll always definitely be appreciative of Ironman. That's for sure.
That's very interesting. Tamara also preferred the Ironman races because of the better bike courses with more landscape. And in Germany, it's completely different. Ironman got a very bad reputation, and there are a lot of things that happened. For example, the death of the official in Hamburg. And so yeah, the entry fees are very high. So there is a lot of bad vibes concerning Ironman. So in Canada, it's different. Am I right?
Yeah, I think the age group athletes might have a bit more of a mix of opinions. The prices are definitely getting really high, especially for World Championship, and there's certainly things that could be done better, but there's also there's not as many safety issues with courses here. I think mostly just because the roads tend to be wider, not as not as congested. It's hard to know exactly what causes it, but also Ironman headquarters is in the United States and their main team is in the United States. So it's possible that they kind of have a better team at these races. I'm not sure exactly the specifics of how Ironman Europe works, if that's like a separate business that's franchised out and that they kind of use the Ironman name or how it works. But yeah, Ironman definitely is like the main brand here for triathlon, and people get into the sport because they want to do Ironman. But that being said, I think it's better when other companies come in and have a little bit of competition. Like Clash has done some good races. Challenge is coming back to Canada this year. They're going into Quebec. So that will be great, and I hope to be able to do that race as well. But yeah, I think that for age group athletes, Ironman's certainly the premier brand here. They're also really expensive though, and if you're looking to get into the sport, you don't necessarily have to go do an Ironman 70.3 that's like $400 to do. There's lots of other races that are a lot cheaper that are also good. There's a race here called the Niagara Falls Barrelman. It's like a one-off race. It's a pretty good race. So there's always other options. But yeah, in Europe, it seems like Challenge is a very good brand, and perhaps, on par with Ironman, or maybe even regarded more highly by some people.
I already made a lot of Challenge family races, and I was always happy, except one race in Heilbronn. But for example, Challenge Almere, I did my first long distance there. It was great, and the entry fee was about 400 euros. And if you compare it to my entry fee in Nice next year, it was 626 euros. So that's a big difference. And for me, as an age grouper, it's sometimes more important to just do a long distance. I don't care too much about the name Ironman. So I often choose the better option from a financial aspect.
Yeah, I agree. And we don't really have much challenge racing here. So I think if we had a big brand that was competing with Ironman, that would be great, because that would, maybe encourage people to drop their prices a little bit. But Ironman almost has a monopoly, which is tough because they can just charge whatever they want. So yeah, I think having more brands is always going to be good. And I've raced with Challenge as well, and they've been great. And I'm going to be racing Challenge Salinas in Ecuador, so in this December, and I'm looking forward to that, and sort of giving a little bit of promotion to some of these other brands, because certainly don't want to give the impression that I only like Ironman, because honestly, almost every race I've done has been pretty well done by all these different race organizers. So I think it's a good thing that in Europe you have Challenge as well. And I've raced Challenge in Spain before, and it was a great race. So Challenge is definitely worth checking out, and their prices being lower, their prices being lower is just, it's just good for the sport.
It's always good when you have many options, because the competition between those organizers is good for the athletes, but also for the organizers, because when you have, like you said, kind of monopoly, you don't really improve anymore because you think you are the best. There is no one else.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, hopefully we get a little bit more of that competition here in North America. But yeah, Challenge Quebec next year. That'll be interesting, because we haven't had a lot of pro races in Canada, and it's always nice when you can drive to a race. For me, that would be about a 6-hour drive, or 7 hours, which isn't too bad. And when you consider how big North America is, and I always prefer driving than flying. But it seems like when you're in Europe, everything's a lot closer than if you're, for me, if I'm like flying to California, it's like a 5-hour flight. Like this, it's quite a big distance here.
I live in Munich, and when I drive 6 hours with the car, I am in Croatia, so in another country, and there is Austria between, Slovenia. So yeah, I think distance in the USA or distance in Europe, that are two things that are completely different. That is like that. But now I think this international format is quite good, because we gain a lot of new perspectives, especially concerning Ironman, for example. And now I would suggest that we dive into your recent race season. You raced Oceanside, St. George, Gulf Coast. You raced the PTO US Open, unfortunately with a DNF. You raced the Ironman 70.3 World Championships in Lahti. You raced Michigan and Augusta. So could you share the highs and the lows of your season?
Yeah, definitely. I started the season in Oceanside. I'd say that was a really good race for me. There was no complaints. My swim was pretty average for me, a little bit behind the leaders, but not too far. and had a really strong bike. It was a hard bike. I was basically keeping up with Sam Long, who is extremely strong on the bike. And we worked our way to the front, and then I managed to get off the bike with Sam and myself and Leo Berger with a lead on some of the other chasers, including Ben Canute and Jason West. And then, the run I ran pretty well considering the bike was quite hard, but Jason passed me and I was able to come third and Leo Berger won. So that was a good start for me. And then kind of similar in St. George and Gulf Coast. I had a good day in both, ended up third. I would say St. George was probably my better race out of the two. I just raced well in St. George. It was cold. It's a hilly course. I like hilly courses. Hilly in North America is different than hilly in Europe. Hilly in Europe means mountains and technical descents, and I don't like technical descents, but when it's in this United States, a hilly course is more sort of long climbs and long straight downhills where you don't have to turn. So that's a much different thing, but I managed to get third there and then third again in Gulf Coast. So the start of the year was good for me, 3 third places, some really good competition in those races. So I was happy with that. And then I really decided I wanted to not train too much in the summer, not race too much in the summer and focus for some bigger races. So I had a 6-week break after Gulf Coast, and I was going to race 70.3 Mont Tremblant, Quebec, which is close to me. I can drive to it. I've done the race every year. And we were there, and race morning, there was a ton of smoke in the air from forest fires. So they canceled the race because the air quality was really bad. It was the worst air quality in the world that day, happened to be right where we were. So unfortunately couldn't do that race, which was pretty disappointing. It was a race that I was pretty likely to be on the podium and have a really good chance to win, but didn't play out. So then back to training for another 6 weeks. And then I went to US Open, and unfortunately I think I just pushed the last couple weeks, some of the last training days a little bit too much and didn't recover well enough on the recovery days. And I ended up sick for that race. I had a cold, something was off. I had a sore throat and just didn't quite feel right. And that kind of showed. I had a good swim, but after that, I was just my heart rate was too high and I just couldn't push much power on the bike. And I was just sort of surviving. I still got off the bike in a pretty okay position, but I was like 30 or more watts less than what I normally do for a 70.3. So I knew something was off. And then in the run, I just felt really weak and I started feeling nauseous. And I just thought I should probably not finish this race because the world championship for 70.3 was 3 weeks later. So I need to recover. So I decided not to finish. I probably only would have been like 20th or something anyway. So it was probably worth it for me to just not do more damage than I needed to. And so I DNF'd that, went over to Europe for a training camp. And that's where I hung out with Joe Skipper and a lot of his friends and Mark Dubrick. And we did a training camp in Font-Romeu in France at altitude. And actually felt very good in that camp. Once I recovered, got over the illness and got used to the time change. And I was having some great training. Everything was going well, and went to Lahti, Finland for the 70.3 Worlds. And I was feeling good, and I just we went 4 days before the race, which is a little bit earlier than I normally would when there's no time change or not much time change. But the pro meeting was like 3 days before the race in the morning. So you kind of had to get there 4 days early. And when I got there, like I felt good, but I think I just got a little bit flat by the time the race came. I probably tapered a little bit too much. I wasn't carrying that much fatigue because the training block in France wasn't very long and I felt really strong right to the end. So I think the mistake I made there was just tapering a bit too much. And by the time the race came, I just didn't feel sharp anymore. And I kind of swam and biked okay, and then just kind of fell apart on the run, which was really disappointing because obviously the PTO US Open and 70.3 Worlds and Lottie were my two races that I really needed to do well, and that was my focus for the season. And they were the two races that I did not well. So that was really disappointing. But I just I used it as an opportunity to learn. I think I've done a lot of big races, and I've done well in some and not well in others. And I think sometimes I take them as trying to do something different than what I normally do. And I don't think that's necessarily smart. I think I've done too big of a taper at times and just gotten to the race and not felt good anymore. So I kind of figured out, okay, maybe a later taper will work better. And that's what I did for Michigan. I tapered pretty late into that race. I was actually, for me, I did the most I've ever done in a race week in terms of training, probably. And I felt good on the start line. I was just strong. I had a really strong bike, and I held on with a solid run to beat Lionel by just like 10 seconds. So that was a great race, and sort of showed me that, yeah, I need to do that at the World Championships races. I was doing way more power. I swam better and ran better. And that's not what you want at a World Champs. You want to have your best. So that kind of taught me that lesson a little bit. And then I raced Augusta the next weekend, had a pretty good race again, and finished second. So yeah, it's been a season of ups and downs. The high was probably winning Michigan so far, and hopefully I can pull together another win or two in these last three races coming up in the next. Well, I race in less than 3 weeks in Mexico. Then I race in December, two races back to back, one in California and one in Ecuador.
And when do you do your season break?
I'll do that after the Ecuador race. So that race is on December 12th, I believe, which is pretty late. But I like to, like I said, I like to race a lot. So if I take a super long off season, it's just really hard for me mentally to get through it because I just love racing. So if I'm not racing for 6 months, there's a lot of, struggles there for me mentally. So I'll finish in December, and I'll pretty much take the rest of December off. I'll barely train, which is great timing for Christmas and spending time with family and just taking a bit of a break from the sport. And then I'll start back up in January training and hopefully get in shape in time to race in March or April.
I can relate to that. And I also need a goal, a competition, so that I am feeling well and so that I am also motivated to train hard. And I can also relate to that tapering story of you, because in 2022, I had a perfect preparation for the Challenge Submarine Middle Distance Challenge Family World Championships. And then I thought it would be good to taper a long time. And I made 12 days of tapering. And then, especially on the run, I wasn't sharp. And now for the upcoming race on Sunday, I started the tapering on Sunday. And now I hope I will have more success. And I think it's always very individual how the body reacts to the tapering.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. You have to learn from past experience. And I think the other thing that is important is to assess how much fatigue you have. Because if you have a lot of fatigue built up and you feel like you really are tired, you might need a longer taper, and that will probably work. But in the case for me with Worlds, I didn't have a lot of fatigue. I wasn't feeling tired. And so it probably would have been good to push my training relatively hard until about 5 days out. But instead, I was only training relatively hard up until about 8 days out. And then I really didn't train much after that. And that was just too long. So yeah, the same story for you, I'm sure you learned from as well. And sometimes you have to really make a big mistake for it to become clear. So maybe I've been tapering a little bit too much for years, but it's hard to tell because I'm still racing pretty well. So now I made the mistake in a bigger way, and I learned the lesson, and I think it will benefit me for races to come. So yeah, excited to put that to work next year at World Championships in Finland. And I'll be going very early to Finland. Sorry, not Finland. New Zealand. Finland's done. I hope they go back to Finland though, because that was a great course, and it was just such a good opportunity for me. But we'll see if they ever get back there when I'm still racing, because yeah, I don't think I'm going to be racing pro until I'm like 40. I feel like I'll be ready to move on before that, but we'll see. Still got a lot more to accomplish.
Definitely, it was a tough course in Finland, I would say, especially because of the conditions. It was very cold, but an interesting course, and I really liked it. Especially the run was pretty tough with that uphills and downhills. And yeah, Riku Bogen was the big surprise of the day. And perhaps you are the next big surprise in Taupo. I hope so for you. And like you have told me, the experience in Lahti was very disappointing, but you managed to bounce back strong in Augusta and in Michigan. In Michigan, you could win the race in a great battle against Lionel, and you came second in Augusta, and the winner was Mika Not. So, can you share some more insights in those battles with those great athletes, Lionel and Mika?
Yeah, definitely. I've raced Lionel a lot over the years, and for a number of years he was a lot faster than me. And then in the last few years, we've had back and forth. Sometimes he's faster, sometimes I'm faster. But this was the closest finish we'd ever had. I had actually not. I had a pretty good swim in Michigan, and I knew I had a lead on Lionel, but our group actually took the leader of our group went the wrong way on the swim at one point, and then we had to correct our line to get back on course. So that probably cost like 15 seconds, which isn't a lot, but when the races are that close, it ended up almost making the difference. So I think I had about a 45-second lead on him to start the bike, which would have been a minute. And then I started the bike, and there was a lead group ahead that had Sam Appleton and some other athletes that I knew weren't quite going to be as strong as me on the bike. So I thought I would be able to catch them. But I started the bike pretty relaxed and sort of worked my way into it. Lionel actually made up time on me at the start of the bike. And then I started to feel good, and I started pushing harder. And from then on, I kind of just pulled away from him. I caught the lead group at 30K or so, and then I just put in a big attack to drop those guys, because we all know how it's definitely possible to sort of get a bit of a draft and to stay with someone on the bike who's faster than you. And I didn't want those guys to hang with me. So once I passed them, I just really tried to stay aero, keep my power consistent. It was a little bit of short hills. So I really increased my power on the uphills and tried to maintain my speed as best I could. And I think I rode the course very well. And I saw that I was ahead of Lionel by over a minute at the turnaround, 55 kilometers. And then at the end of the bike, I got a split that I was 2 minutes ahead. So I thought, okay, 2 minutes, that's probably pretty good. Like, I think I can hold him off. I definitely rode really hard to try to get a lead. So I knew I probably wasn't going to run my fastest run ever, but I was kind of optimistic. And then, yeah, I actually felt pretty good on the run. It was a relatively flat run course, pretty fast. Conditions were good. It was about 16 degrees, so it was really ideal for biking or for running. And Lionel didn't make up very much time on me in the first 15K. He only made up about 1 minute out of the 2 minutes. So I thought, okay, I've got a really good chance to hold him off. But he really closed very, very fast. I don't think I slowed down much. If I was looking at the splits again, I maybe slowed down a tiny bit, a few seconds per kilometer at most. But he ran his last 3K in, according to his watch, he said they were 3:14, 3:13, and 3:09 for his last 3K. So he really made up a lot of time, and he surprised me. With about 400 meters to go, he was right behind me, 10 seconds behind me. So that was a bit of a shock, and I had to put in a big effort to kind of hold him off. And as soon as I kind of accelerated, and after I saw him coming, I knew that I was going to be sick at the finish line, because my stomach just didn't feel well. So I honestly think that if the race was even another 100 meters, he might have beat me. So I got pretty lucky there. I timed it well. As they say, you should finish with nothing left in the tank. And I definitely managed to do that. So that was exciting, but I think everyone sort of wanted that battle to happen again in Augusta, and the Augusta race played it a lot differently.
That's true, and I love those battles, but tell me more about Augusta.
Yeah, so Augusta, we had Mika Newt come over from. Is he from
Germany?
He's from Germany. Oh, he is German. Okay.
He was one of my guests in the podcast, and I will talk to him next week. So I'm very excited about what he will tell me.
Yeah, he's a really strong guy. We've raced before in the 2021 and 2022 World Championships. We were fairly close. I think he was a couple places behind me in 2021, and then he was a few places ahead of me in 2022 in St. George. So I knew he's improving, and he's really young. So he's obviously very strong.
And he had a very bad season because of an injury, and then he caught COVID. So he had a terrible preparation in the first couple of months of 2023.
Yes, I saw that. And I also saw that when he did the PTO race, he was still not quite up to on the run. He was getting issues and perhaps still having effects from his injury. So I didn't know if he would be back to 100% or not, but I thought for sure he'll at least be very good on the swim and bike. So my plan for that race in Augusta was to do the best swim I could to try to either stay with Mika or be close enough that I could quickly catch him on the bike. And then with him and I working together, I knew that Lionel would not be able to ride the same pace as us because Mika's very strong. And it seemed like at the time I was putting a little bit more time into Lionel than normal. So with two of us together, I thought we would definitely pull away. So that's how the race happened. The Mika Newt swam on his own off the front. I couldn't quite keep up, but I wasn't too far behind. I was actually third place out of the water, which is my best ever position in a swim. I don't know if it was my best swim ever because there just weren't really fast swimmers there, so it's hard to compare, but I was 45 seconds behind him on the swim, and then he chose to put aero socks on before the bike. So I made up a lot of time in transition, so I was about 20 seconds behind him to start the bike. And I could see him right there, so I decided to ride very hard for the first however long it took to catch him. So I actually probably did close to 400 for the first 5 minutes just to make up that time. I think it took me about 8 minutes to catch him. And once I caught him, we just took about 10-kilometer turns at the front. It was pretty clear to me that we were very evenly matched on the bike that day. So yeah, when I was at the front, I was pushing a little bit more. When I was behind him, I was pushing less, and I think the same would be true for him because we're both pushing a little bit of giving each other a little bit of that draft. So we were very efficient in how we rode, and I think that's a big reason why we put a lot of time in. So we got off the bike. It was about a 4-minute lead to Lionel and Trevor. So at that point, I knew that that unless I had a terrible run, I was going to at least be second. But remember, I said Mika put his aero socks on before the bike. So when we got into transition, I still had to put socks on and he didn't. So he got a pretty good lead on me just in transition, about 15 seconds. And then I just couldn't close it. I felt a little bit, if I'm being honest, I never felt good on the run. I didn't feel terrible, but I just didn't have that same sort of freshness that I had in Michigan where I felt strong and I felt good the whole run. This time I felt more like I was surviving the run, and I definitely didn't have it in me to put in a surge to try to catch up to Mika, and he was running great. Even if I had my best day on the run, I don't know if I could have kept up. Like it was pretty hot at that point. The run course was not a fast run course. It was a lot of turns, a little bit hilly, but pretty warm. And I think it was actually a little bit longer than 21.1. I think it was an extra 300 meters or so. So yeah, Mika was fresh, and he obviously had corrected all of his injuries and gotten over COVID. And it was clear to me that, okay, he's going to be winning today. After the first 5K or so, I could tell, unless he blows up, he's going to be winning. So I went into my own sort of pacing where I just wanted to make sure I was consistent. And Lionel still did make up a lot of time. He was definitely closing on me. And then I figured I would be okay when at the 8 kilometer turnaround. I think it was 18 kilometer turnaround, or sorry, 8 miles. That's what it was. That was the 8. So that's about 16K or 15K or something like that. I could see that he wasn't that close, and I just needed to stay consistent. But I never really slowed down because I know he can make up a lot of time in the late stages of a race, and that's what he did in Michigan. So I pushed really hard until the last turnaround, which was 1 kilometer to go. And there I could see Lionel was still well over a minute behind me. So at that point I was pretty relaxed and just finished the race. And I was glad to be done because yeah, that one was tough. And it was back to back weekends right after Michigan. So I was really happy with how I backed it up, and my swim and bike were just as good or better than Michigan. It's just the run where I felt just a little bit off, but I think that's still a really good race. And even if I had only done Augusta, I don't think I would have beaten Mika. He was really strong, and I'm looking forward to racing him again someday. But for that day, he was going to win.
That was a big comeback after Lahti for you, and I think it's okay to be defeated by Mika Not, because I am convinced that he will be a world champion in the future. He is very talented, and it's always funny when you see Lionel running. It looks terrible, but it's very fast, and he's one of the best runners in triathlon. But it's crazy when you see his running. I even sometimes I think I am running better when you see it. You know what I mean? But I'm not that fast. Unfortunately, running is my weakness. But now let's talk a little bit about Lionel and your relationship to Lionel. He is a very polarizing person, I would say. Either you like him or you don't, and he's very entertaining. But this also means that other athletes like you don't get as much focus because all the attention is on him. At the same time, he greatly benefits the sport. And for me, it's one of the biggest role models in my triathlon career, to be honest.
Yeah, so I agree for sure. He's very polarizing. I think most people really like Lionel, and I really like Lionel. I've been following his YouTube for years, pretty much watched every video he's made, except for some of the race week videos. I've watched almost all of them. But yeah, he's a really good role model for sure. He kind of started the sport at a professional level a few years before me. So I was always sort of looking up to him and seeing, okay, like this guy from Ontario is doing great. Maybe someday I can do that. And like I said before, he was way faster than me early on. And he definitely captured the attention of triathletes around the world, but especially North America. He's probably like the most popular long course athlete. Well, probably the most popular triathlete, period. His YouTube is super successful because I think it's because of how honest he is. And he's very human. He makes a lot of mistakes. He's open about that. And I think it's just, the way he speaks is very engaging and interesting. So I just love watching his stuff. In terms of how, we interact, we always chat at the races. I'd love to hang out with him more, but he's super busy. Like, he's got a family. He's always traveling he's got his, his son now. He's got his camera guys, and he's always there with his wife, and he's just busy. So one time maybe we'll get out for a round of golf, because we both like golf sometimes, but we certainly chat before and after the races, sort of at the pro meeting things. And I really like Lionel, but definitely I have been sort of living under his shadow for a lot of years. If someone sort of thinks, who are the top athletes in Canada, they think Lionel and probably Paula Findlay, right? So that's kind of the feeling I get coming up in the sport. And even in the last couple of years, where my results are very comparable to his, and this year my results have been better than his, I would say. It still feels like everyone's attention's on him, but it's not necessarily all about performance. You have to develop a fan base, and he's done an incredible job of that, and he deserves it. So I can't be bitter about it. I need to sort of focus on developing my own social media, and I've done some YouTube as well, and I'm hoping to continue with that more. But it's obviously hard because it's not cheap to have these videos produced and things. So it's a work in progress. But yeah, I think overall he's probably benefited my career more than anything else, because if I'm battling with him in races and he's mentioning me and things like that, like I get a lot of followers. That last little Instagram video response I did to his video after Michigan was like my most viewed Instagram reel ever, and I got a whole bunch of followers and people shared it, and it was fun. So yeah, I'm always happy to race with Lionel and compete with him, and I've had the better of him most of this season. We've raced 5 times, I guess, if you include World Championships. And out of those 5, I've been ahead of him 4 times. So I've had his number this year, but I'm still not counting him out, because with all the things he's doing now to improve, his efficiency, I think he's going to be super tough to beat whenever he makes his comeback to racing, which is, I wouldn't be surprised if he races Indian Wells, but if not, next year, like, he's going to be flying. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And I'm going to be working on my aerodynamics as well. Seeing Mika Newt in Augusta and just a lot of the top guys, you can tell they've done testing and they're just a little bit more efficient with their aerodynamics. And that's something I'm working on now. So hopefully by my next race, I'll have saved at least a few watts, and over the off season, and hopefully going to be investing in wind tunnel and some different things to really get to that top level. I think I've been pretty lucky with being relatively efficient on the bike since I've been a pro. Like, I've had a relatively low drag coefficient just by chance, naturally, but it's not good enough anymore just to go with what looks good or feels good. You have to kind of do the little things to kind of reduce your drag as much as you can, because everyone else is. And I think I was talking to Mika after Augusta, and him and I did a similar power output, and he's way bigger than me. He's like he's probably 185 centimeters or something, and I'm 177, and I'm also 70 kilograms, and he's probably 75. So I should be doing less power to go the same speed as him, but it's taking about the same. So I need to find some efficiencies. And that would probably be the same if I compared to, some other Europeans who are really dialed in as well. And I just need to go to that step for myself.
Mika is still very young and he is so professional. I have never seen a 23-year-old guy that is so focused and doesn't make a lot of mistakes. And it's amazing to watch him. And like I have told you before, I'm quite sure that he will have a great triathlon career, at least when he doesn't have another big injury or something like that. Sometimes it's also good or bad luck.
Oh, for sure. And him being so young, for me, what really worries me and encourages me to just keep pushing myself is that a lot of the best guys are super young. Like Rico Bogan is 22 or 21 even. And I'm 30 years old. Like I don't have time on my side in terms of physiologically. I'm probably not going to get that much better. I've been training seriously for over 10 years, and I can still improve, but I think I have more room to improve on my efficiencies, especially on the bike, than anything else. And it would be silly for me to just stay the same as I am now and be like, oh, I'll just try to get 10% stronger. Well, that's not going to happen when you're 30. Like I'm very happy with how I've progressed physiologically. Maybe I can get another 1%, 2%, but I'm not 22. I'm not going to get 10%. So I've just got to do all the little things now, and doing all the little things perfectly. I do think I'm on the podium at 70.3 Worlds. It's just putting together the perfect taper, the best training you can, the best equipment, and then a little bit of luck. Sometimes the way the race plays out, it takes a little bit of luck, but making my own luck by having the best swim I can, getting in the right position. Like at 70.3 Worlds, you had to be out of the water with Frederick Funk if you wanted a chance to make the lead group. And I've done that before. I did that at Worlds in 2021. I got out with Fred Funk, me, him, and Magnus Ditlev, or Yeah, it was me, him, and Ditlev, I believe, who were the only ones to make that lead group who came out with the second swim group. And I need to do that again. And I didn't do that at Worlds. So I know what needs to be done and I can do it. And that's why I'm still very motivated. It's just a matter of doing it and being consistent and, getting a little bit of luck, not getting injured, and being smart about those types of things as well.
Definitely, it's all about the marginal gains now in pro triathlon, because little differences in training, nutrition, equipment make in the end the big difference in the big competitions like the Worlds in Lahti, for example. And I'm sure that you are able to be on the podium in the 70.3 World Championships next year. But as you said, you need a perfect race and a perfect preparation, and then everything is possible. And you would also have the possibility to switch more to Ironman racing, because when I see the average age of the athletes competing in Hawaii, for example, they were 32 years old, so older than me. And in the women's race, it was 35 years of age average. So Taylor Nipp was kind of youth girl.
Yeah, it's really possible to race very well in the full distance. I mean, Anne Haug is, I think, over 40 now, if I'm not mistaken, or around 40.
You're right. She will become 41 next year in January.
Yeah, so it's I don't feel like I'm in a rush to do Ironman as a focus, but you're right. I definitely have that possibility, and it's something that does interest me. Next year might not be the year for that, just with 70.3 Worlds being in December. It seems like if I do decide to do a full distance, it would be earlier in the year, and that might be a good choice, and I'd be happy to do that. But if I qualified, I don't think I would do Kona next year. I think I would still stay focused on the middle distance. And Taupo is a great opportunity for me where I know I can have a really good race there. So I'm not in a huge hurry to switch over. But yeah, being 30, I think it could make sense for me to kind of switch my focus into full distance as I get a couple more years. And we'll see how I enjoy it. I did do one full in Mallorca in 2021. Didn't really have a good race. I was like 13th or something. And it definitely showed me that you need to properly focus on the distance to be successful. It doesn't have to be a year-round focus, but you need to have at least one good training block and proper taper and rest. And I just kind of did it without a whole lot of training and flew to Mallorca late and had a lot of stress and just didn't have a good race. But I'm definitely I still believe I can race very well at that distance. So it's something that's on my radar. For next year, we'll see. I mean, if I don't get into any of the PTO races, maybe I will decide to do some full distance and try to do well in that series. So yeah, to be decided, but I still have a lot more years in the sport. And unfortunately, the Nice course isn't really my favorite option for a world championship. I did the world championship in 2019 for 70.3 there, and that's where I crashed and really injured my shoulder very badly. And the descending, I've done a fair bit of descending at camps and different things, and it's just it's not something I enjoy about cycling. I can appreciate that it takes a large amount of skill and that it's a totally valid way to compete in cycling, and have some people being stronger on the descents and some being a little bit more tentative. That's interesting, but to me, it's just not something I'm wanting to push myself to do. It's definitely different if you grow up in Europe and you do it all the time, and that's a huge advantage. But yeah, it's just not fun for me to take those risks, and I don't think Nice is a course I'll ever really want to race on again. So we'll see what happens with the Ironman World Championship, because that leaves Kona, which also I'm not a huge fan of super hot races. So I would have to pick one or the other. I think I could definitely still do well in Kona with the proper preparations. So that would be the one I would lean towards. But who knows what will happen over the next few years. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see an Ironman World Championship somewhere else, maybe somewhere else in Europe, or who knows. So I'm kind of keeping my options open there and seeing what happens.
Yeah, let's see. And I would advise you to fully focus on the 70.3 words in Taupo, because I have the impression that the course there suits you well.
Yeah, I agree. I was talking to Teresa Adam, who's from New Zealand. Yeah, and she was just talking with me a little bit when we were in Augusta, and she mentioned how the course is like not that technical, and it's a pretty simple course, not really hilly, but not really flat either. And I think it's a course, like you said, that I could do really well on. And also, when it comes to December, if you can really peak in December, that's a bit of a unique thing because most people don't do that. So we'll see with next year how many people really go after that race. I still think it's going to be really competitive, but that'll be a really good one for me. I've raced well in December before. One of my best races, or possibly even my very best race last year, was in December in Indian Wells, California. So I think if I can just take that performance with a little bit more learning and a little bit more efficiencies, doing the little things right, go to Taupo, have a good chance for a podium. And yeah, that's going to be a huge focus, but that's still a long ways away now, 14 months. So lots to do before then for sure.
A long way to go, and I think it's especially difficult to peak in December because of it's autumn or even winter, and it's getting cold, and so many people get some illness or catch a cold, for example, and that is always bad for a preparation for a world championships. But let's see, and I hope the best for you there. And one thing I wanted to tell you, I'm not a good descender, but now I lived 2.5 months in Crete, and there's only uphill, downhill, very technical, and it's crazy. I improved so much, and today I rode the bike course for the Ironman 70.3 in Vuljagmeni, and I was bored because it was just a straight road and only kind of rolling hills, and the hills didn't really feel like hills anymore because I'm so much used to the steep climbs and the steep downhills in Crete. So I think you still have some potential to improve in that aspect of your cycling career.
For sure. I definitely would still love to train in some mountains. I did that in Font Romeu a couple months ago, and I the first day I was like so slow and like really tentative, and by the last day I was a lot faster. Still probably not nearly as good as a lot of other people, but I definitely improved a lot as well. And I think doing something that is your weakness is always a good thing in training because it's going to just help with your ability in racing. And even if I don't race any really, really technical descents, it'll still help me with every course has some turns and some descents and some technical pieces. So if I can save time in those sections, that's just going to be a huge benefit. So yeah, I love training in those environments. I just don't like in a race when you're feeling pressure to go as fast as you can. That's where I think mistakes can be made for me. But in training, it's great. Definitely helped me improve there. And yeah, I love mountain camps. I love training at altitude. It seems to work well for me if I can time it properly. And so I'll certainly be doing that again someday. But yeah, I shouldn't say that I don't think anyone should train in descending. For sure, it's a great thing to do, and especially if you can train with some people who are really good descenders, they can kind of help to give you tips, and you can follow their lines a little bit and sort of learn from them. So that's what I was doing in Font Romeu with Joe Skipper, and a lot of his training buddies are quite talented on the descents. So that was a huge help for me.
I believe that. And now I would suggest to wrap up today's episode. Thank you so much for sharing your incredible journey and insights with us today, Jackson. It's been a real pleasure having you on Klartext Triathlon, and we wish you all the best in your future, and especially for your races in December. And do you still have a question for me?
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been great. My question for you is, are you going to be coming to North America and racing with us here? There's, lots of good opportunity here. Have you ever been much to USA, and do you have any races there that you would want to do?
I have never been to the USA or to Canada or North America, and I would definitely like to change that. And to be honest, I really like Tamra. I really like you. So my choice would be, of course, the challenge race in Quebec, or also the Ironman 70.3 Mont Tremblant. I think you have a very beautiful landscape in Canada. And yeah, I would love to participate in a race in Canada, to be honest.
Yeah, those are great options. Quebec is really nice. The Tremblant 70.3 is one of my favorites. I've done it every year. It's awesome. I don't know about the challenge race yet in Quebec, but I'll definitely I'll know after next year. So I'll let you know. But Quebec is kind of one of the few older cities in Canada that feels like a European kind of vibe. Canada's super young, and we don't have a lot of old things here. So to me, it feels like that. But then you go to Europe, and there's castles that are like thousands of years old. So everything's very different. But I think that's a good choice if you wanted to come race here. And then the other place that's really beautiful in the USA, I would say a lot of the mountain areas in sort of like Colorado or California races are always beautiful, and the weather there is amazing. So if you wanted to race somewhere that's warm in December, the California is a pretty good option too.
I will put that on my race calendar, and perhaps in 2025 it will be possible. Next year it will be difficult because I am also thinking about qualifying for Taupo. But yeah, let's see if it works out. I'm not a I'm I would say I have a good level, but I'm not very good. And nowadays, even in the age group, you have to be very, very competitive, and you have to finish, for example, 8:45 in Frankfurt to qualify for Hawaii in my age group. I am in the age group 30 to 34, and it's very difficult, even for age groupers, but I will give my best, and perhaps we will see each other in Taupo. That would be great. And now, some words from me for you, dear listeners. We value your feedback and would love to hear your thoughts on today's episode. Feel free to reach out to us through our website or social media to share your comments and suggestions. Running a podcast like this takes time and resources, and we would greatly appreciate any support you can offer. If you are in a position to do so, please consider making a donation to help us continue bringing you inspiring content. Thank you so much, and thank you for being part of our podcast community. And we look forward to bringing you more engaging content in the future. Until next time, take care and stay inspired. And goodbye, Jackson. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
We hope you enjoyed the episode with Jackson Laundry. It was a fantastic conversation, and we are grateful you joined us. Before we wrap up, we have got a friendly reminder for you. Don't miss the excitement and challenge of the OMNi-BiOTiC Klartext Triathlon on the 25th of August 2024 and the Upland Triathlon in May 2024. These events promise incredible experiences whether you are a pro or an age group athlete. Spots are filling up quickly, so act now. Head over to our website and secure your place. Your journey begins with a single click, and we can't wait to see you at the starting line. Thanks for tuning in and being part of our community. We'll catch you at the races. We also appreciate donations via PayPal at ioswim at web.de, positive reviews on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and more, as well as your feedback. Thank you, and keep enjoying the listening experience.